This is Framboise from Oxbow Brewing in Maine, and it's part of a hybrid beer-wine category called Oenobeer. Flavor-wise, it tastes like a traditional barrel-aged sour that was aged with fruit, only that fruit wasn't a fruit, it was mature Sangiovese. Enobier is the perfect combination of beer and wine, and it can be made by co-fermenting any style of beer with any style of wine must. For this project, I'm making my first ever Oenobeer, so I want to keep things as simple as possible. Let's start by reviewing the plan. Alright, here's the recipe I came up with for the beer side of things. It's a single malt and single hop recipe or smash beer using proximity pale malt and some Nelson Sauvin hops. And it's set up to brew on my Brewtools B40. The only changes I've made to the equipment profile is I've shortened the boil to 30 minutes and I added an altitude adjustment for my altitude. The other thing I've done here is calculated my water profile and some acid additions. With the beer recipe out of the way, we can turn our attention to the wine. This is going to be my first time making wine, but I'm going all out. I don't want some cheap juice kit, I want the skins. And after shopping around, this is what I'm going with. A little expensive, but that includes shipping, and if you know what Phantasm is, then you might be thinking what I'm thinking. Now, just a couple more things. I think it's only right we throw this into a barrel, and this one looks like the perfect size. It's 28 liters or just over 7 gallons, so I should be able to get 5 gallons of finished beer out of here, no problem. I also need some yeast for both the beer and the wine, and a couple other goodies to promote healthy fermentation. Now we just wait for everything to arrive and we can make some beer. I have about 6.5 gallons of treated water in the mash tun, and I'm mashing in with 6 pounds of proximity pale malt, targeting a mash temperature of 149 Fahrenheit or 65 Celsius. I'll just keep mashing this in until everything is nice and saturated, and then I'll let it hang out for a few minutes before turning on the recirculation. After adjusting the mash pH with lactic acid, I'm also adding some ultra firm to make sure this beer finishes bone dry like a wine. Now, while the mash cruises along, let's prep the barrel. Anytime you get a new barrel, you'll need to hydrate it to swell the wood and make sure it's watertight. This one is brand new, so I'm starting with ground temperature water, and all I need to do is fill it all the way to the top. If you have an older barrel, warm water might work even better. Either way, once the barrel is hydrated and watertight, it's ready to be filled with beer. But in this case, I won't actually use the barrel until secondary fermentation, so I need to fill it with some holding solution to make sure it doesn't dry out or get infected. To make the holding solution, I mixed 8 teaspoons of citric acid with 16 teaspoons of potassium metabisulfite and a gallon of water. Dump that into the barrel and then filled the barrel to the top with water. So 1 teaspoon of citric acid and 2 of potassium metabisulfite per gallon of water, and it can hang out like that for 6 months or longer. After a 60-minute mash at 149 Fahrenheit or 65 Celsius, it's time to yank these grains and get our boil started. We're up to a full boil and it's time for the first hop addition. Here's 10 grams of Nelson Sauvin and the 30-minute boil timer starts now. Just like that, the 30-minute boil is complete and it's time to chill this beer down and get ready for fermentation. For this beer, I'm using some super cool yeast, the Black Project Culture from Bootleg Biology. With the beer in the fermenter, I'm popping open this bucket of grapes that I started thawing about 24 hours ago. It looks a little funky, but it smells absolutely incredible. For white wine, the first step is usually pressing these grapes and fermenting the juice by itself, but I'm making orange wine. Orange wine uses white grapes, but it's fermented on the skins like a red wine. After punching down the skins and checking the pH, I'm rehydrating some Cellar Science floral wine yeast with some firm start. After a few minutes, I added that mixture to a flask with some of the grape juice and let it spin on the stir plate for another half hour. Eventually, I pitched the yeast, gave it a shake, loosely replaced the bucket lid, and then for the next 2 days, I punched down the grape skins twice per day, once in the morning and once in the evening until it was time for the next step. After 2 days of strong fermentation, it's time for these two concoctions to become one and make their new home in this beautiful oak barrel. The beer went first and it transferred without issue, but when it came time to siphon the wine, I realized I forgot a super critical step. You have to separate the grapes from the juice. So into the press it went and out came about 3 gallons of half fermented wine, which is exactly what I need to fill the rest of the barrel. This time it transferred without issue and started bubbling as soon as I sealed it up. The next day I added some Cellar Science firm-fed yeast nutrient and left it alone for the next few months. After nearly 6 months of fermentation, I transferred to a keg, primed the beer with additional sugar, and bottled it in Belgian bottles. Let's see how it turned out. This is it. After 8 months, it's finally time to taste the Enobier. This was the very first beer I brewed for season 6, and it's the last one going out. It's straw yellow and has a bunch of carbonation, but the head falls out pretty quickly. On the nose, I get a lot of white wine notes, some bitter tannin, and some oak. Going in for a taste, this beer has some apple and pear up front, then fades into white wine, oak, sharp acidity, and tannin. For me, this beer is just about perfect. It's incredibly simple in design, but in flavor, it couldn't be more complex. You can zero in on specific notes, and then a couple sips later, you're completely focused on something else. And as it warms up, it becomes even more expressive. I love it. And if you like making sour beer, you should really consider giving this a shot. The one thing I would keep top of mind next time is the first beer you put through a new barrel picks up more oak flavor than normal. So I probably should have put a dark beer through first and then this one, but luckily it's not crazy oaky and I think it will mellow over time in the bottle. Big thanks to More Beer for sending the new barrel and some of these ingredients. My name's Dan, this is Hops and Gnarly. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you again soon.